Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something that's, well, it's both universal and almost completely invisible: the impact of emotional trauma.
Hmm.
We're going to be exploring what our source material calls mental wounds. These aren't scars you can see,
Yeah.
but they really do determine the strength of your entire life.
And our sources for this are, they're really unique. They're coming at this from two very different angles. On the one hand, you have this huge international research study, just the hard data.
Mhm.
And on the other, a theological analysis that looks at historical examples to sort of chart a path to healing.
And our mission today is really to bring those two together, to distill what these wounds are, how they affect us, and most importantly, what the practical steps are for resolution.
Exactly.
So we have to start with the data, I think. It really provides the scientific grounding for all of this.
It does.
Our source points to a study in the Economic Times from December 2023. And this wasn't just some small survey.
No, not at all. This was a massive undertaking, an international team, a 75-year period.
75 years, and they had, what, over 800,000 participants?
826,000 to be exact. It's an incredible data set designed to track people across their entire lifespan.
So what was the big takeaway from all that work?
The finding was it was undeniable. Mental wounds, whether they happen in childhood, midlife, or even later, they don't just fade.
They stick around.
They do more than that. They compound. They become these major foundational problems in the years that follow. They act like this constant source of friction.
And it's a friction that affects everything, right? Your personal life, your family.
Everything, your job, your friendships, and as the source is very clear to point out, even your spiritual life. It's pervasive.
And there's a number attached to this, which I found fascinating.
Yes, the quantitative measure.
Cute.
The research concluded that people carrying these unhealed wounds face about 4% more problems in their lives than others.
4%. Now, that number can sound kind of small on its own.
It can.
But let's try to unpack what that actually means. It's not 4% less happiness one time. It's 4% more friction in almost every interaction every day.
Exactly. It's that moment of exhaustion that makes you snap at someone you love. It's a little bit of distrust that costs you a business deal.
Or the anxiety that, turns into a real physical illness over time. It's like you're constantly walking into a slight headwind.
And over 75 years, that slight headwind becomes a systemic drag on your entire life. It's not subtle at all.
So the science basically validates the problem. It says, look, these wounds are real, they are measurable, and they are costly.
And that gives us the license to ask the harder question. If they're invisible, how do we even recognize them?
That's the perfect transition to the next part, the hidden cost and the symptoms. Because if you break your arm, it's obvious.
Right. Everyone sees it. There's a cast, there's support, a clear treatment plan. The injury is external.
But these internal wounds are the complete opposite.
They're invisible. Often, we ourselves are actively ignoring them or pushing them down. And the people around us, they just don't understand what's going on.
You can have a great job, a nice family, you can look completely fine on the outside.
But internally, the damage is still active. They're still running the show.
So how does it show up? What are the behavioral signs that this 4% friction is at play?
The source material is very specific here. It lists things like being easily provoked to anger or irritation. A reaction that's way out of proportion to what actually happened.
I see.
There's also a tendency to become disillusioned or even hateful very quickly. And a big one is an inability to trust people, a perpetual suspicion in all your relationships.
Which would naturally lead to self-isolation, right? It just becomes easier to keep everyone at arm's length.
It does. And all of that comes together to create this deep inner lack of satisfaction and peace.
The source has a line that really captures this. If there is a wound inside, life outside will not be orderly.
That's the core thesis. That lack of order is the result of constant internal pressure. You can try to manage it, hide it, pretend everything is fine, but that's not sustainable.
It'll erupt eventually, as anger or frustration or a broken relationship.
Always.
But wait, how do we know this isn't just normal life struggles? Life is chaotic sometimes for everyone.
That's a crucial point. The source makes a distinction. It says these symptoms, this fatigue and emptiness, they persist even when external things are going well.
So you could have the promotion, the happy family, the financial security,
and still feel completely empty or exhausted inside. That's the key.
So the real indicator of an unhealed wound isn't external failure, it's a profound lack of inner peace, regardless of your external success.
Precisely. If your internal gauge is always reading pressure, even in calm seas, then we're talking about an active, unaddressed wound.
Which leads to the next big question. If this is so common, why do people stay stuck? Why do we see the same worries, the same fights, year after year?
Well, according to the source, it's because the wounds are hidden, but they're not healed. And there's a huge difference.
The difference between surface patching and actual root healing.
Exactly. We are absolute masters of superficial treatment. But all the while, the inner person, the heart, the source, uses the word balavinam, which means it's becoming weakened.
We surface patch, we manage how things look, we move to a new city, get a new job, find a new partner.
Right. We put on this face that says, peace, peace, everything's okay.
But underneath that thin coat of paint, the suffering is still there and it's active.
It's like having a crack in the foundation of your house and just painting over it. It looks fine for a while, but the structural damage is still there. The next tremor will reveal it all.
So the argument is we have to stop painting and fix the foundation, heal the, what does the source call it, the root wounds.
The adikayam, the deep underlying injury that's the real source of the pain.
And what does focusing on that actually do?
The source argues that your external circumstances become secondary. The real light of life only starts to shine when that inner root wound is healed. If you don't address the adikayam, it will continue to dictate your path.
It's a call to strengthen what they call the inner human, and that requires actively surrendering the wounds, not just hiding them better.
You simply can't build a peaceful life on a damaged foundation. The first step to healing is just to stop hiding, to acknowledge the wound is there.
And this is where the source makes a really interesting pivot. It moves from the science and the diagnosis to spiritual and historical case studies.
Yes, to show how people manage to get through profound trauma without letting it turn into bitterness. The source calls this destructive bitterness kasipu.
Let's start with the first case study, Joseph.
Joseph's story is just. It's a masterclass in ongoing trauma. It wasn't one bad event. It was shock after shock.
Betrayal by his own brothers.
Sold into slavery, then falsely accused and thrown in prison for years. I mean, if anyone had a right to be corrosively bitter to develop that kasipu, it was him.
But he didn't. That's the outcome. He didn't seek revenge. He came to this incredible internal conclusion that God had transformed all that evil intent into something good.
And the key for us is that this didn't happen by him just pretending the pain wasn't real. It happened because he refused to let that pain metastasize into bitterness.
The wound became a source of wisdom instead of a chain of revenge.
Exactly.
Okay, then there's David, rejected by his family, persecuted by a king. But the part of his story that really hits me is the betrayal from his inner circle.
Yes, at his absolute lowest point, when he was in deep distress, his own followers, the people he'd led and protected, they turned on him. They wanted to stone him.
That's the kind of thing that could just harden a person forever, make you unable to trust anyone again.
It could. But the source points out that David didn't hold on to the bitterness. He actively chose to surrender that pain. He understood that carrying it would just drag him down.
And surrendering it even in the middle of chaos would lead to elevation. And the final example, Daniel and his friends. This was state-sponsored trauma. The lion's den, the fiery furnace.
The ultimate betrayal by the systems of power. And here, the source points to an almost physical manifestation of their inner state.
What do you mean?
Well, the analysis notes they were physically protected, that not even the smell of fire was on them after the furnace.
And the reason given for that is?
That there was no bitterness in their hearts. They didn't let the injustice fester inside. They clung to their faith. And that created a kind of internal and external resilience.
So across all three of these stories, the lesson is about choice.
It's all about choice. Did the pain harden your heart and fuel that katsipu, that bitterness, or did it draw you closer to some kind of resolution?
The path forward is an active choice for non-bitterness.
Which brings us right to the source's proposed path to resolution. And they frame it as a kind of partnership.
A partnership?
Yeah. There's a promise, which is, I will restore health to you and heal your wounds. But it requires human cooperation.
And that cooperation is what?
It's non-negotiable. You cannot hold on to bitterness and at the same time ask for healing. The two are mutually exclusive.
And the hardest part of that cooperation is, of course, forgiveness.
Oh, absolutely. The source uses the parable of the unforgiving servant to show how an unforgiving heart just makes the wounds deeper. It keeps you chained to the past.
We really need to clarify what forgiveness means here, though, because a lot of people resist it. They think it means saying what happened was okay.
And the source is crystal clear on this. Forgiveness is not condoning the offense. It is not saying the other person was right.
So what is it?
It's the act of surrendering the burden of the pain, the valley as the Source calls it, to a higher power. It's saying, yes, this hurt me deeply, but I refuse to keep carrying the burden of it in my spirit anymore.
That's where the freedom is. And it doesn't mean you have to abandon common sense.
Not at all. Forgiveness doesn't mean you stop setting boundaries or taking precautions to keep yourself safe. You can and you should.
But you choose not to carry the bitterness, because that's the chain that binds you to the trauma.
And we have to be honest here, too. We have to avoid the surface patch again. We often tell ourselves we've forgiven someone just to, look spiritual or feel better about ourselves when we haven't actually done the work.
So what is the work? What are the actual practical steps this analysis suggests?
They're surprisingly simple and very direct. They're designed to stop the hiding and start the surrendering.
Okay, step 1.
Step 1, be honest. Be direct about your pain. That means saying internally, this experience crushed me, or when I think about that person, I still feel rage. You have to validate the injury first.
Acknowledge the wound is real. And step 2.
Step 2, surrender. This is the active choice. It's saying, I don't want to carry this anymore. I surrender this pain to a power greater than myself.
And that's the moment the healing process actually begins.
It is. And the result, over time, is that those old memories start to lose their power. The pain lessens. Peace starts to return.
This isn't about finding a better mask for the pain.
No, it's about real internal transformation. The whole point of this isn't to perfect your external appearance. It's about the beautification of the inner human.
Because a wounded heart can't really experience true satisfaction or blessing.
It can't. And the message is that the pain you've carried for years, the shame, the rejection, the betrayal, it's meant to end. The wound does not have to be your identity.
And this brings it all back to you, the listener. The Source leaves us with a few key questions for some real self-examination.
Questions that cut through all the noise.
You have to ask yourself honestly, do I have real peace in my life? A kind of stillness that doesn't depend on my circumstances?
Do I have a joy that the world didn't give me, and so the world can't take it away?
And this might be the toughest one. Is my heart calm even when I think of the people who wronged me? Even when I remember the trauma?
And if the answer to any of those is no, that's not an accusation. It's not a reason for shame.
It's just a signal.
It's a signal that the root wound, the adikigam, is still active.
Right.
And that no is actually the starting point for your healing.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought. It comes from blending all of this, the data and the wisdom. Your wound does not have to remain an identifier of your pain.
The healing you receive is meant to become a testimony. It's meant for others. Today, your personal suffering can become the story of someone else's healing tomorrow.